Do you believe in setting boundaries, even if it means losing people?
Every family has traditions, and for mine, the tradition was taking that one picture every year and posting it on Facebook like it was some sacred ritual, like it somehow proved to the world that we were this perfect, united group. But if you looked closely, you would notice something that most people outside never questioned: my absence, my permanent erasure, like I had been airbrushed out of their lives even though I was standing right there in the bloodline. The first time it happened, I remember thinking maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe mom forgot to tag me. Maybe she picked a bad shot where I wasn't looking and thought she was doing me a favor by not including me. And I let it slide because I didn't want to be the one who made a big deal out of just a Facebook post. But it didn't stop. The next year came, and the year after that, and while the rest of them, my parents, my brother, my sister, even their kids, were lined up smiling with captions about family first and grateful for what matters most, I was nowhere to be found. And here's the thing, I was alive, I wasn't estranged, I wasn't missing in action. I was just treated like a ghost. Every time that photo popped up on my feed, my stomach would twist. I would click the comments where friends of the family left messages about how beautiful and complete we all looked, and I would wonder if anyone noticed my absence, if anyone questioned why the oldest daughter, the one who never missed a holiday growing up, was now invisible. I did bring it up once, quietly, carefully, almost apologetically, because part of me thought maybe it was unintentional. I asked my mom why I wasn't in the photo that year, and she said something like, "Oh honey, you're reading too much into it. It was just the people who happened to be there that day," even though I knew I had been there that day, sitting right across from them at the dinner table, just not invited when the camera came out. When I pushed a little, she sighed and told me I was being dramatic, that I should let it go. That's when I realized it wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, one that was easier for them to maintain than to face the reasons they didn't want to include me. And then came this year. The tradition continued as always, except this time they took it one step further. Not only was I missing from the picture, but when mom posted it, she listed out each family member's name in the caption like she was giving thanks: Dad, my brother Mark, his wife, their 2 kids, my sister Jennifer, her husband, their little girl, and even grandma, but not me. My name wasn't there. It wasn't forgotten. It was erased. They crafted a reality where I didn't exist, and for the first time, I couldn't just swallow it down. I stared at that post, my phone in my hand, and I felt this mix of rage and humiliation that burned hot in my chest. I thought about the years of silence, the excuses, the gaslighting, the way they told me I was imagining it. And now it was right there, in writing, proof that they had decided I was not part of family first. What they never knew, though, was that while they were erasing me from their little narrative, I was out in the world building something they couldn't touch. I had been grinding through my career, working late nights, pulling favors, pitching ideas, and pushing until the walls cracked. And just last month, I got the call, the one that told me I had made Forbes 30 under 30. Me, the daughter they never mentioned, the sister they left out, the ghost they pretended wasn't sitting at the table. Forbes 30 under 30. It was validation, recognition, proof that I mattered. And yet, the first thought I had was that my family probably wouldn't even notice, or worse, they would dismiss it the way they dismissed everything I ever accomplished. I sat with that for a while, torn between wanting to scream it from the rooftops and wanting to keep it to myself out of spite. I thought about posting it online, but then I imagined them scrolling right past it, maybe even pretending they hadn't seen it, because ignoring me had become second nature. And then I thought, why should I play small? Why should I accept invisibility when I had proof in my hands that I was something more than the role they assigned me? That's when it clicked, the thought I couldn't shake: if they won't see me, I'll make sure they can't avoid me. I'm not talking about another Facebook post or some carefully worded family email begging for recognition. I'm talking about something so bold and so inescapable that even my mother, even my brother, even grandma with her Sunday church friends, would have no choice but to look up and face the truth. It was in that moment, staring at their caption that erased me, that I made a decision. I was done being invisible. I was going to remind them in the loudest, most undeniable way possible that I existed, that I was thriving, and that their silence no longer had the power to bury me. And that's when I decided, if they wanted me gone from their story, fine, but I was about to write my own headline and plan it right where they couldn't miss it. The thing about patterns is that you do not see them when you are still trying to make excuses for people you love, and for the longest time I kept telling myself little stories that made their choices less cruel, that it was timing or logistics or a mix-up. Until I started keeping track in a notes app because I needed to know whether I was losing my mind or whether this was as deliberate as it felt, and once I began listing the moments, the Thanksgiving when I flew in and somehow missed the cousins-only shot, the spring cookout when I was asked to hold everyone's jackets while they did the matching shirts pose, the birthday post where my mom wrote a paragraph about what a blessing it was to have a daughter and then tagged my sister, only my sister. Something in me clicked in a way that was both relieving and devastating, because if it is a pattern, then it is not an accident, and if it is not an accident, then I have to decide what I am going to do about it. I tried to talk to them like a reasonable person does when something hurts, and I got the kind of replies you give a child you want to quiet, the soft voice and the patronizing lines about reading too much into things and choosing to be happy. And then the pivot to how busy everyone is and how I should be more understanding because family seasons change, which sounded lovely in a refrigerator magnet way and also meant nothing, so I stopped hoping for a tidy talk that would fix the foundation and started paying attention to what actually happened when I wasn't performing gratitude. And what happened was that my brother got celebrated for every ordinary milestone like it was a national award. My sister received rounds of applause for anything she touched, and I was treated like an extra whose name you forget when the credits roll, useful when someone needed a resume review or a contact or a ride from the airport, invisible when it came time to acknowledge who kept showing up without demanding the spotlight. There is a special kind of rage that comes from being told you are imagining the thing that is burning your skin, and it pushes you toward either begging for scraps or building your own table, and I had picked the second path for years without calling it that. Grinding through the late nights and the meetings that do not end and the deals that looked dead until they weren't, telling myself that if I became undeniable in my work, then maybe the thing at home would soften because success, in the stories we tell, is supposed to make people proud, except it does not help when the pride would require admitting they were wrong about you, and pride does not do confession. After the post this year where my name vanished from a list that included literally everyone else down to the cousin's dog, fine, not the dog, but it felt like it, I did something I probably should have done sooner, which is that I stopped trying to win a rigged game and started thinking about how to make their rules irrelevant, and while the Billboard idea was the spark that kept me up at night grinning like a lunatic, I knew I needed a first move that would not blow the whole plan. Something that would pull the curtain back just enough to stop the gaslighting without giving away the finale. Something clean, undeniable, and a little bit savage without being cruel for the sake of it. So I opened the cloud account where my phone has been quietly hoarding every candid shot for years, and I started building an album with a title that made me laugh even as my hands shook, Photos You Forgot I Was In. And I went through holidays and barbecues and graduations and Sunday dinners, pulling the frames where you can see me carving a turkey or lighting candles or carrying folding chairs. The little proofs that I was there and not some imaginary daughter who refuses to participate, and I added simple captions with dates and a few words that anchored the memory. No sarcasm, no slander, just facts, because the truth does not need pyrotechnics when the lie is fragile. When the album felt complete enough to make the point and not so big that people would tune out, I did the thing that changed the air in the room even though we were not in a room together. Which is that I dropped the link into the family group chat with a short note that said I had made a collection of moments I cherish and wanted everyone to have them, and then, because I have learned how visibility works, I also shared it with the extended family thread and a handful of close family friends, who always ask how I am and then tell me I should come around more, and I put the privacy setting to anyone with the link because I was done playing hide-and-seek with the truth. The reactions arrived the way summer storms do, heavy, messy, and suddenly everywhere, with my sister chiming in first to say that the album felt pointed and that I could have approached this privately. which made me laugh out loud because I had approached it privately for years and received the kind of answers you give to a customer support ticket you want to close. And then my brother lectured me about negativity and family unity and how things get misinterpreted online, and my mom sent a voice message that began with a sigh and ended with a request that I take it down because it was confusing people, and my dad, who hates conflict until it is time to be disappointed in me, wrote that this was beneath me and that I should be the bigger person, which I suppose I was by not replying with the list of times I had already been bigger. I did not take it down, and instead I replied once, calmly, with a message that said the album would stay up for 2 days, that I hoped people enjoyed seeing the memories I certainly enjoyed living, and that if anyone felt confused they were welcome to ask me directly because I would be happy to clarify. And then I put my phone face down and went to make coffee with the kind of steadiness that comes from finally doing something that honors your own sanity. Because while this was not the grand gesture I had in mind, it was the opening move that ended the debate about whether I was inventing the problem, and it forced them to sit with the discomfort of a story they could not edit in a caption. And when my cousin forwarded me a screenshot of one of my mom's friends commenting under the family photo to say that the album made her tear up and that she had loved seeing me at so many gatherings over the years and could not believe I had been left out of the post again, I felt that bright, clean click of a lock opening, and I knew the next move would not just be satisfying but unforgettable, because if they wanted to curate a reality without me, then I would curate a reality they could not ignore, and the canvas I had in mind would be impossible to scroll past. There is a moment when a plan crosses from a petty fantasy you entertain in the shower to a living thing that wants a calendar and a contract. And for me that moment arrived when I caught myself mapping out the drive my family takes every Sunday to drop off leftovers at Grandma's place, tracing the turns in my head, thinking about where they slow down and where they always hit that red light, and realizing that if I wanted to plant a fact they could not scroll past, I needed it standing at eye level exactly where their routine would force them to look, because I was done with hints and quiet dignity and pretending that being the bigger person felt anything like winning. I had been sitting on the Forbes news like a hot coal in my pocket, both proud and strangely sad, because the first person I wanted to tell used to be my mother, and now I did not trust her with my joy. So I told work friends and a couple of people who knew how long I had been grinding, and I let the congratulations wash over me without giving my family the chance to flatten it with a polite thumbs up, and then I did what people who are tired of being erased do, which is that I let the anger power the research, and within an hour I knew which outdoor company owned the faces on the road into Grandma's neighborhood, what their inventory looked like for the next 2 weeks, how fast they could turn creative around if I supplied a clean headshot and a single line of text, and what it would cost to hold the space so no one could swoop in and snatch my moment with a last-minute graduation banner or some church revival notice that always shows up in summer. The rep who answered sounded like a man who has heard every local business owner pitch the best sandwich in town, and he perked up when I said I wanted a personal congratulations message, which he warned me they sometimes reject if it takes shots at people. And I told him I did not need to drag anybody because the truth looked better without an opponent, and I said the line exactly as I wanted it, my face and my name with a simple caption that read Forbes 30 under 30, and he paused for a half beat and said, "Well, that is one way to announce yourself," and I said, "That is exactly the point." He asked about timing, and I asked for the Sunday morning install because I know my family's schedule better than they know mine, and he balked and said they usually do Monday cycles. And I said I was willing to pay the rush fee and the premium to lock the unit for 14 days, and he said he could make a special request if I prepaid and signed a clause that said no refunds even if I changed my mind. And I told him that changing my mind was the one luxury I had already given away for years. And I was not interested in buying it back now, and he laughed softly and said he would send the paperwork in an hour. While I waited, I did something that felt almost like praying but with spreadsheets, which is to say I laid out the chain of events I wanted, not because I could control people but because I could control the moments that would force choices, and it looked like this. Billboard goes up before church, cousins and neighbors see it on the way to morning services and start texting. Grandma's porch becomes the day's gossip hub. Mom finds out in real time when someone tags her in a community group Post that says they are proud of me, and by the time my parents call to demand an explanation, the town has already done the work I could never do with a private talk, which is to make my existence and my success part of the local weather. And once something is in the air, you cannot stuff it back into a drawer. The contract arrived, and I read every line like I was reviewing a deal at work, and then I added one small rider that the rep said they do not usually see on personal buys, a clause that required the company to notify me of any attempt by a third party to modify, obscure, or buy out the placement during my term, because I know how quickly a family that values optics over honesty will throw money at a problem, and I was not going to let them bulldoze me with a credit card and a polite apology to the sales guy, and when he asked if I expected trouble, I told him I expected consistency, which is the polite word for what they have been for years. I wired the payment, sent the photo, approved the proof, and then I did one more thing that made me smile in a way I had not in a long time, which was to set up a simple landing page with nothing but my name, a brief thank you for the support, and a press link to the Forbes list, because if the town was going to talk, I wanted them to have the story from me rather than hear it filtered through the same family voices that always shrink whatever I bring to the table, and I connected it to a short link that fits neatly under the caption in case anyone felt curious enough to take a picture and look it up later, because I have learned that curiosity is stronger than loyalty when the truth glows. By the time I closed my laptop, the plan felt real enough to breathe on its own, and I could almost hear the argument my parents would have about whether to ignore it or confront it. And I decided I would not be home that Sunday because I wanted the phone calls to pile up without me watching the screen, and I wanted them to sit with the sight of my success towering over the route they have driven for decades. And I wanted to feel what it is like to choose myself without asking permission, and as I was pouring a glass of water, my phone vibrated with a number from Grandma's town that I did not recognize, and I let it ring once more than was polite before I picked up, already certain that whatever voice spoke next would either try to stop me or prove that the fuse I lit had finally reached the powder. The unknown number turned out to be the operations manager from the outdoor company who, sounding both apologetic and a little entertained, said he wanted to confirm the Sunday morning install and also to let me know that about 20 minutes after my paperwork cleared, a gentleman with my last name had tried to buy the unit for a sudden community appreciation message that would run for 2 weeks starting immediately, and that while he did not want to speculate, the caller seemed keen on paying a premium if the existing contract could be reconsidered, which it could not because of the rider I had insisted on. So he was calling to assure me that my placement was intact and that in his experience any noise would die down once the artwork went up and the checks had cleared, and I thanked him with a calm that felt earned and told him the noise was the point, because after years of pretending I did not exist, I was making it very easy for everyone to find me. Once that was set, I spent Saturday doing what people do when they have already pulled the lever and are waiting for the machinery to start moving, which is to tidy tasks that do not matter yet somehow settle your breathing. And then I made one more move that felt like the opposite of spite, a small gesture that framed the whole thing in the only way that mattered to me, because while this was a reckoning with my parents and siblings, it was not a war on Grandma, who has always been kind if not brave, so I called the local florist and arranged a simple delivery for Sunday morning, a modest bouquet with a card that said, in plain words, that I loved her, that I had some good news to share, and that I wanted her to have something beautiful on her table before the porch filled with opinions, and I included a duplicate of the magazine page with my name on the list, because I wanted her to see the headline in her hands and not just in the sky. Sunday unfolded like a script I had written in my head and then handed to people who did not know they were acting it out, because before I had even finished my first cup of coffee, my cousin texted a photo taken from the passenger seat of her car with the caption that she was screaming and that the whole church line was buzzing. And then a neighbor I barely know messaged me to say the town had never seen anything like it and that I looked strong and unbothered, and I let those words land, because I had not felt either of those things in a very long time, and then, like a clock striking, the family calls started arriving. First my sister with a sharp whisper asking me what the hell I thought I was doing and whether I enjoyed humiliating everyone. Then my brother, slick with that righteous tone he uses when he wants to recenter the story around his discomfort, telling me I had crossed a line and that mature people handle family matters privately, and finally my mother, whose opening salvo, "You have no idea what you have done to your grandmother," told me that they were going to hide behind the one person I would not attack, which was exactly why I had chosen a move that celebrated me without insulting them. Because the strategy here was clarity, not cruelty. I listened without interrupting. Then I told my mother, in one long, steady breath, that I had practiced. That what I had done was put up one sentence about my achievement on a wall that everyone in town sees already for everything from yard sales to political slogans, that I had not named a single person other than myself, that I had not accused or mocked or shamed, and that if she felt embarrassed it might be worth asking why a daughter celebrating a milestone reads as an attack only to people who have grown used to erasing her, and I said that the album had been my gentle move, that it had been ignored and reframed as drama, and that the Billboard was simply the honest version of the same truth they refused to hear in private, which is that I exist, and I will not be edited out for anyone's comfort. She tried a different angle, asking whether I could at least take it down after a day because people talk, and I said people talk anyway, and that, for what it is worth. The first person to call me that morning from the town had been someone who told me she was proud and that she wished she had known sooner, and then I let the quiet stretch. And in that quiet, I heard the small sound people make when their script runs out and they have to decide whether to change their minds or double down, and my mother doubled down with a line about how this will follow the family for years, which made me laugh a little because being left out has followed me for years and no one minded then. While those calls were happening, the operations manager pinged me again to say they had received 3 separate buyout inquiries from numbers tied to my parents' businesses and that the clause had done its job, the schedule was locked, and the unit would run exactly as contracted, and he added, almost conspiratorially, that in his opinion the clean simplicity of my line made the whole town lean in harder because there was no insult to debate, only a fact to process. And I thanked him again and told him he might be better at family therapy than he realized. By early afternoon, the porch chorus had reached Grandma, who finally called me with a voice that trembled at the edges, but held steady down the middle, and she said she had received the flowers, that she had read the page over breakfast, that she was proud of me, and that she wished people would stop acting like celebration is a crime, and then she asked a question that slipped under my armor more than any accusation had, which was whether I would be coming by later because she would like to take a picture with me, just the 2 of us, and keep it on her mantle where everyone who visits has to see it, and I told her yes, that I would come by, that I wanted nothing more than to sit with her and laugh about the gossip like we used to. And as I hung up, I realized the shape of the final move I had been circling without naming, a move that would not only end the argument, but rewrite the tradition they used to control, and the thought of it made me smile in a way that felt like relief, turning into resolve as I opened my calendar and started making calls. When I drove into town later that afternoon, long after the morning service crowd had dispersed, but before the evening lull when the neighborhood settles into television and leftovers, I could feel the tension in the air without anyone having to spell it out. Because the Billboard stood like a sentinel at the corner by the gas station, my face and the line in crisp letters staring down at every car that passed, and it had already done the work I intended, which was to end the luxury my family had always enjoyed of ignoring me until it was convenient. Grandma met me at the door with that careful smile she uses when she knows the house has been humming with opinions, and she hugged me in a way that told me she was proud even if she could not say it too loudly. And I sat with her at the table while she fussed with the flowers and showed me where she planned to set the magazine page, right beside a picture of my grandfather in his army uniform, because she said accomplishments deserve to be remembered where people could not overlook them. The calls had not stopped all day, and by the time I got there my phone was vibrating with another round of messages, my sister demanding to know whether I was satisfied now that I had blown up the family name, my brother warning me that people were laughing at us, which, to him, was always the ultimate sin, and my mother leaving a string of voicemails that swung between guilt, anger, and weary dismissal, as though I had staged this for an audience of strangers instead of for the only audience that had ever mattered to me, which was them. Sitting with Grandma, I realized the revenge had already landed because they were talking about me nonstop, not out of love, but out of the kind of obsession that comes when you cannot control a narrative anymore. And for the first time in years, I was not chasing their approval, I was forcing them to react to mine. It would have been enough to leave it at that, to let the Billboard run its 2-week course and to bask in the fact that they could not scrub me out of a caption this time. But something inside me knew the final move needed to be more permanent than a rented space. And that was when I told Grandma what I wanted, which was a new picture of a real family tradition that belonged to me, even if it was just the two of us, because if they wanted to curate an album where I was missing, then I was going to curate one where I was centered. She teared up a little, nodded, and asked if I had brought a camera, and when I told her I had arranged for a photographer to stop by, a local woman I had hired through a referral, she laughed and shook her head, saying she should have known I was not going to do this halfway. When the photographer arrived, I explained that I wanted a portrait of me and my grandmother together, nothing fancy, nothing staged to look like a Hallmark card, just us sitting where we usually sat, because authenticity was the point. And as the shutter clicked, I felt a sense of reclamation I cannot fully describe, the feeling of a tradition being rewritten in real time, a new starting point planted right in the soil where the old one had been poisoned. Later that night, after I left and drove home, I posted one of the photos online with a caption that said, "My family picture for this year, proud to be with the woman who has always seen me," and then I linked the Forbes article beneath it. Because if the past decade had taught me anything, it was that people cannot pretend not to notice once you make it impossible for them to look away. The fallout was predictable but strangely satisfying. My mother called, furious that I had dragged Grandma into it, even though all I had done was give her flowers, a clipping, and the chance to smile for a camera, and I reminded her that Grandma had asked for that picture herself, that she had insisted on putting it on her mantle, and that if she was uncomfortable it said more about what she had tried to hide than about anything I had revealed. My brother tried to lecture me again about respectability, about what colleagues and church friends might think, and I told him calmly that people already thought what they thought, that their opinions had never spared me from exclusion, and that the only difference now was that the truth was visible enough to drown out the lies. By the end of the week, cousins who had stayed neutral for years started reaching out privately to say they were proud of me, that they had noticed the erasure, but never knew how to bring it up without making things worse. And one even admitted that seeing my name in Forbes had inspired her to apply for a fellowship she had been too intimidated to pursue. It was in those moments that I realized the victory was not only mine, that exposing the truth had cracked something open for people who had been complicit in silence, and that while my family might never forgive me for forcing their hand, the larger circle now saw me clearly, and once you are seen, you cannot be unseen. I do not know if reconciliation is possible, or if it is even something I want, because the cost of being included under their terms has always been invisibility, and I am not willing to pay that anymore. What I do know is that the Billboard came down after its run, but the photograph with Grandma stayed on her mantle, and every visitor who steps into her living room will see it sitting there beside my grandfather's. Undeniable proof that I am part of this family whether they like it or not. That, more than anything, was the point. They wanted me to be invisible, and I made sure I was unforgettable, not just to them, but to anyone who ever tried to write me out again.